but I wanted the freedom. And so I jumped into it, not knowing. I was 21, I had no idea. And I failed along the way, success of failure. And I encourage this to anyone who wants to go on their own. It's not a question of knowing everything, because you're not. You've got to just dive in, which is the most challenging part. When you dive in, then you figure things out. And it really comes down to, it doesn't come down to how much money you have in the bank.
Welcome to the Adriana Ostapenko podcast. I'm here with my guest, Rene. It's such a pleasure to meet you. I was actually a guest at his podcast maybe a couple of weeks ago, and we had such an incredible conversation that I felt like we both knew we had to do it again and
It was a lot of fun.
So here we are. I mean, I love that I have an opportunity to now have you over here, and I'm very curious to find out way more about you. So please share a little bit of who you are and what you do.
Right. So I'm a realtor investor in Kingston, Ontario. Simple as that.
Okay, perfect.
I've been investing for about 20, 25 years or so. So I have a bit of background in all this. And I also help coach people in investing and in buying real estate. And we also manage our own portfolio as well.
Tell me a little bit about your portfolio.
It's a lot of student rentals, duplexes, and a bit of multiplex. It's all in Kingston as well.
Do you do management of the portfolio yourself as well?
So what we realized is we had such a portfolio that my background's in contracting.
Okay.
So I was a teacher for a while, for about 3 months or so, didn't really like it, jumped into contracting, and that grew bit by bit into a portfolio of houses and all this, and we're doing a bit of work. And getting good property management was very challenging. So I would hire basically my own guys to do the work. And eventually I was doing the whole work myself. So I systemized it, brought some procedures down, and delegated a lot of it. And now we take care of our own property management, which is a lot better, I would say. And that way we know what's going on in the market, and then our vacancies are low. And it seems to work out. So we help our investors as well as our own portfolio.
Let's dive into what has made you successful in real estate.
A good question. So I would say the good team is definitely one. Having a good team makes a difference, but also the persistence. Like, I've been at this, it's surprising. I really never really had a job. My work was entrepreneurship or business-like, and I would dive into that. And when it didn't work out or I struggled with the money, then I jumped back into T4s. It was completely opposite. I didn't really want the T4. So a lot of people have the T4, which is nothing wrong with it. But I wanted the freedom. And so I jumped into it, not knowing. I was 21, I had no idea. And I failed along the way, success of failure. But when it was really rough, then I'd go back to teaching. And it happened once. Actually, twice. I did taxes for a winter at H&R Block, and that was it. So over the course of 30 years, I figured a few things out. And I encourage this to anyone who wants to go on their own. It's not a question of knowing everything, because you're not. You've got to just dive in, which is the most challenging part. When you dive in, then you figure things out. And it really comes down to, it doesn't come down to how much money you have in the bank. It's sure, if you have some reserves about a year, that could help. But if you take even a line of credit, you've got a reserve right there. And it comes down to, the question is, do you think you can figure out how to generate income within a year? And a lot of people, they don't want to. It's tough. And sure, it is challenging. It's a lot easier getting the paycheck, every 2 weeks.
That's a very similar advice that I give to people when they ask me. To be fair, I feel like most people only make the jump when they're forced to, through being laid off or fired or,
Yes. And a lot of people that I know who are very successful, most of them, I think majority, they either started young because they didn't know. They were completely ignorant on what the hustle was. But there's a few of them that got laid off in 2008. A lot of people got laid off, and then they had to figure it out on their own. And once they were pushed against the wall, then they figured it out. But you need that push occasionally, that support, and that difficult moments. But yeah, it's very important.
And like burning bridges, right? Because then when you don't have an option, you don't have an option. And it takes a lot of courage to set your own bridge on fire. It takes a lot of courage to turn around and torch it and saying, like, I don't have an option, I can't go back this way. I have to keep moving forward.
You know the saying, you got to burn the ships. And that's exactly what it is. You got to just commit to it. And it's not ever going to be easy in the beginning, but whatever you're going to learn along the way, it's going to help you. And I find a lot of, not everybody, but it's a human condition. If you fail, people just like, they beat themselves on the back. It's like, it's a failure, and they take that failure personally. It's those who can distinguish between who they are and what they do, which could be successful or failure. You got to have a discrepancy between your identity and what your results. And those who are able to achieve that duality do far, far better, because it's hard to grow if every failure, every lesson that you're learning, you're beating yourself on the back and you're putting yourself down. It doesn't allow for more growth.
I love that. So, and I found that COVID did the same thing for a lot of people, because just like 2008, which was a defining moment for so many people, in the financial markets and recession that we went through, COVID had a similar effect, because a lot of people got laid off or just had to leave their jobs, and now they had no option but to change their lives. Yes.
COVID was tough for some. It was a very good time for us. We were very, very busy, and it was a great time. It was it was very good. It was challenging, but it was amazing.
So in terms of like your success in real estate, we talked about teams, we talked about doing the things, and I agree with you as well. Action is the biggest teacher that we may have. I have a student who he was, wanting to learn how to speak from stage, and he made a few comments about just going to different conferences. Says, I feel like I can do a better job than almost anybody that I see. And I'm like, I love that observation. What's the difference between you and the person that's on stage? And it's the fact that they're on there and doing the thing and taking the action. So, making the moves and acting on the things that you want to do will get you the furthest that you can go in comparison to staying still and trying to figure out from where you are.
Yeah. And just every day pushing towards action. And there are days that happens to me where I'm going, actually, am I getting closer to my goal? I got to revisit. Okay, I got to rewrite the plan or do something differently, because I'm not reaching the goals that I'm looking to achieve in a year or in 3 months. So it's the constant challenge of redirecting in a way your behavior, but constantly doing some type of action to get forward. Always, constantly.
Let's talk about goals for a second. What goals do you have in place right now?
Well, I'm at this for 30 years. So I'm in my 50s, which I don't feel as if I'm very old, but I still enjoy doing what I'm doing. So one of the goals that I have is being able to live. This is kind of within reach, but not quite there. I mean, in one way, I'm kind of settled in Kingston. I like living in Kingston. But one of the goals is to be able to live anywhere in the world, generate income and live anywhere in the world. And we're approaching that. A lot of what I do is over the phone, over online. So we're not quite there yet. And also, obviously, children play a role in that. I do value children first. But once there's a time where there won't be as much need for my presence, then I can see my wife and I just taking off and having a lot more freedom and basically being able to work anywhere in the world and just going from one place to another. And I'm also reevaluating. I mean, I love Canada. I'm Canadian. I've been in Canada I'm born and raised here, born and raised in Toronto. I love the place. But I'm realizing, I'm also noticing friends and family who are going elsewhere. And they're like, this is pretty good here. And we're like, okay, well, tell me more about it. It's opening my eyes where some places in South Asia is very nice. In Mexico is very nice. There's many places. So in a way, I've got this belief, and it's a question of revaluing certain beliefs that I have. One of them being that Canada is the best place to be. And sure, it's good. There's good out of it. But to say that it's the best place and the only place in the world to be. So I'm reevaluating that at the moment. And I'm kind of figuring out exactly where to be going and where to be traveling and how to be living the next 5-10 years.
I love that. So you talked about Asia, you talked about Mexico, any place that kind of calls you a little bit more than others?
I'm still looking around because it's not like I'm going to be settling in one place and that this is it. It's a question of, I realize also that I got a buddy who basically lives, he's got 2 suitcases. That's all he owns. And so a lot of freedom, we get this impression that freedom is having a lot of stuff. But in fact, freedom is linked to discipline, and discipline to not having as much stuff is basically just having enough to live off and having the freedom of moving around and that fluidity. And that's very appealing now because my whole goal for the past 20 years has been to accumulate more and more and more. And you realize, okay, this is nice, but there comes a time where it's like, okay, this is enough. There's enough. Like I've got enough. I got to move on. I'm enough, that type of saying. But the idea of having like a large portfolio of 1,000 doors, it's not my goal. And if those who want that, go for it. But you can do a lot with just 50 to 60 doors and get by really well. It's just a question of managing it and also managing your expenses, managing what you want.
I love that. That's such an important conversation. It's so, it's not as often talked about in the real estate world, I find, as, because we're just there's people that are coming and they're learning real estate, and there's just such a big vision. They're also watching people that have been doing it for many years and thinking like, oh, that's where I want to get to. And, hundreds of doors or, owning a fund.
Start off, sure. You need to have the concept of more is better. But as you age, you get a bit more wisdom. You realize that less is actually better.
I love that. I was just having a discussion with a friend, and one of the things that that's been on my heart is I love to pay off my mortgage, and not have, the worry of the carrying and also feels like it would give me more freedom, because every time I think of traveling or spending like the winter somewhere, I'm like, oh, how am I going to pay for this place and the other place? If this place is paid off, there's a home base, and I feel like I feel more comfortable and have more freedom to do things. And it's not a very popular opinion. Like, what do you mean? Like, you can borrow that money for very low interest rate and go on and do other investments with it. So, but to your point, more is not always better.
It depends on your age category. It depends on where you're at. Like like I said, I've come from a different era. This is not my first rodeo. I've been through a lot, and I'm realizing over time that less is actually is better.
I love that. That's amazing. I'm looking forward to hearing more of where you end up and some of the places you explore as well. For the real estate investors getting started right now, what would you suggest that they do first?
Get immersed. Just dive right in. And if you're going to join a group or a support team, support is key. Learn as much as possible. But there comes a time, maybe after 6 to 8 months, once you've immersed yourself, you learned a lot, you got to take action. Because when I coach people, like there's people who want to just talk about certain things. Mm-hmm. But it's those who take the action, you learn a lot more. I mean, you have children, I have children. It's like talking about children to people who have no children. You just got to dive right in. You're going to learn a lot more about it. It's that simple. There's a difference between book knowledge and experience knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that experience knowledge only comes through taking action. And through taking action, I've got couple of years ago, someone called me and they wanted some coaching and they wanted to learn more. And they're like, he's like, I want to learn everything because I don't want to do mistakes. I'm like, what do you mean you don't do mistakes? You're bound to make mistakes. Like, that's being human. You're going to make mistakes. It's not going to be perfect along the way. And it's those who can actually accept those mistakes, let them be and move on, do far, far better off. From the years of coaching I've done, this is what it comes down to, just persistence and realizing that the mistakes are lessons to learn. And as long as you can learn those lessons and let them be, you can move on.
So tell me a little bit about your coaching. Is your audience like real estate investors that are getting started?
Yeah, it tends to be. So I do a lot of, I've done a couple of JV partnerships, and the JV partnerships is people in their, maybe in their 40s up to about 58 or so, while there's people who are 25 to 32 or so. They're just starting off. They don't have much of the money. Can't really be doing, they don't have much of a family. Like they don't have a family, potentially. So they've got a lot of time on their hands. And this is what I tell people who want to get started. We have three types of energy. One is our physical energy, our mental energy that we can do. The other one is time. As a mother, you've got children, there's less time. Like the amount of time I wasted before children, it is huge. So if I can utilize that time properly. And the other resource is obviously funds. So if you're low on funds, most likely you've got high amount of time on your side and you've got a lot of energy. And if you can sharpen that focus of energy and time into one activity, one knowledge, and one experience, then you're far better off. Then obviously the funds or the capital will get there. The resources will be there as well. So that's what I tell people. And it's mostly people, mostly guys, probably in their 25 to about 30-ish or so. They're just starting off. I want to try a few things. And there's many ways about doing it. But a lot of it comes down to mind shift, really. Just a mindset. You've got to believe in certain things. Your philosophy has to be out there. And as we spoke about this earlier in my podcast, what you believe, your internal belief, your internal philosophy is just it gets reflected out there. So if you believe, I'll talk sometimes, if you believe there's no deals out there, if you repeat that all yourself, well, yeah, there's no deals out there. It's just a self-propelling belief. So it's careful on what people tell themselves. It really, from the years of experience I've done this, it stems a lot about thoughts and what people believe and what they tell themselves on a regular basis.
How do people go about changing a belief that they currently have?
That's a good question. It's a very, very good question. And because a lot of what we do, we've got to go out of our comfort zone. But I've come to terms that if we got to go out of our comfort zone, we need a rock. We need something solid that keeps us grounded. So you have to have some type of activity. It could be jogging, it could be doing yoga, it could be meditating, something that keeps you grounded so that you can reduce stress. Because once you're out of your comfort zone, it's high stress area typically. So you need to be able to ground yourself down somewhere, somehow on your own, not with outside sources, but something that you actively do that you can control and reduce your stress. And when the body and the mind and the nervous system is relaxed, you're able to literally change the synapses in your brain to change your thoughts. It's very powerful, but takes a lot of time, but you need to be relaxed with it. Mm-hmm. And it's often a question of repetition as well. Affirmations, what you tell yourself on a regular basis. So when I walk to the gym, I have, I ams, or I tell myself that I'm strong, I'm capable of achieving what I want. It's simple things, but rather than looking at and judging what's going along, you're feeding yourself in the beginning of the day, having morning routine, and just being grateful for what you have along the way. Those things, those elements are very important to change one's belief. It takes time, but it's definitely possible.
So how do you go about, you mentioned a few practices. You mentioned meditation, jogging. You mentioned like affirmations. If somebody's just coming to you, one of your students, and they want to know how to start to practice, what kind of practice to start, what would you recommend for somebody that's just kind of getting started in calming their nervous system?
It all comes down to having a vision. What is it you want to become? What person do you want to be? How many properties do you want to own also? And reverse engineering from that, but having a goal in mind. And it has potentially, usually it's about 18 months ahead of time. The 18 months is enough to go, I can do something about it, but it's not too far. But if your goals are on the low side, or they're not very exciting, then go for the 10-year goal. 10-year goals, and the reason people write the 10-year goals is because it's like, well, I've got time to achieve this. I know I can achieve this, and they go bigger. They don't think of the low goals. They think of even bigger goals that they're like, well, I don't know if I can achieve this, but 10 years, that's enough time. I'll probably get there eventually. So they go really, really big. And so having big goals is very important. Another thing is to write it down. Write down those goals, and you got to write it down in the present tense. Now it's a bit of it seems like a mind shift. It seems really strange, but you got to write it in the present tense. The reason you got to write it in the present tense is because the mind does not distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. It's a really simple trick. When we watch a movie, when someone's flying or jumping out of a helicopter, we believe that's real, but really it's just on the screen. So if you can trick your brain in believing what you're reading is real, doesn't mean it's going to happen. It means the probability is going to be increased. The chance, success is really a chance of probability. You add that, so whatever you wrote down, you send it, you share it with your wife or your spouse or your husband, your friends, your support team. There's a higher probability, once again, that's going to be achieving. If you then provide a deadline to it as well, well, there's once again probability, higher chance of it achieving as well. So writing it down, writing the present tense, and reading it on a regular basis to know where you're going and having a plan of action to get to it. It sounds really simple, but few people do it. So for those starting off, that's what I would suggest, is write down what you want to become in the present tense, read it over, and make an action plan to get to it.
I love that. I think that's exactly how I got started in my self-development journey when I hired my first life coach. That was one of the first exercises he gave me. He says, write down as if you were waking up in the now, but in your best day possible. What does your life look like? Your happiness, there's no limitations, geographical locations, financial limitations. You are your best life. Tell me from the moment you wake up, how does your day go? And write it in the past, in the present tense. So it was such a fun exercise, and I had to keep coming back to it too, because I'm like, oh, I want to add one more thing in there, and I want to add, something else. And it was so fun to do. The cool thing is how powerful that is, that I looked back, I'd say not even a year later, I looked back, and as I'm reading it through, I'm like, oh my God, how many of these things actually came to fruition? And like we're talking about in less than a year here. And I was like, this is insane. One of the things that I did on that letter was I described this future home that we wanted to move into. And at that time, we weren't really even actively looking or, but crazy enough, within a year we were in this new home, and as I'm reading the description of the home, I'm like, wow. And it's not exactly because we got to leave space for surprises and enjoyment in different ways, but so good. It was
it's all this is nothing new. It's talking about it. Definitely provides more opportunities for others, but it's all written in Think and Grow Rich. It's all in there. It's all in there. Just follow in the book. So, and
Yeah, I love that. So powerful. And what I'm coming to with this, it's just having those daily practices, just like anything else, like going to the gym, unless you're putting the daily effort into, all the different practices you mentioned, it kind of, you default to just functioning in your subconscious and functioning in a conscious way through life on autopilot. And that's when life starts to get like stressful or demanding, or accidents happen, or, out of alignment for you, until you're able to live life very intentionally. And these practices allow you to stay intentional through your life.
Yeah, it really comes down to the habits that are created, because the results aren't guaranteed. But the habits, yes. You start the habits, eventually some results will come about.
I love that. Can we talk about money?
Sure.
So we had a conversation earlier about, ultimately the value of time. And you're like, you know what? I prefer to have a little less accumulation of things and way more time and freedom to the things that I want to do. Talk to me about your concept of money and how it comes about in the lifestyle that you want to create for yourself.
So money is really a tool. It's just a tool that you rent in a way sometimes. And some of the tools, it's like a tool that you rent at Home Depot. Sometimes it could be very expensive, sometimes it could be very cheaper. But it's a tool to acquire wealth. Simple as that. It's a type of energy. And the purpose of money is not necessarily to pay bills. It's to generate more income with that money. So it's that simple. And money is created out of thin air every day as we speak. So money has no value in itself. We have to give it value. You bring that dollar bill to the Amazon forest, it means nothing. So we have to give it value. So money is always seeking value. So as long as you can give value to others, give value to society, money will flow.
I want to circle back to one of the things that you said, and out of like all the different things that you mentioned, how do you define, like, what type of energy are you tapping into to attract money?
Well, got to talk to those with money because there's a lot of people. So when I started off, I was hounding the banks. I was constantly hounding the banks for money, and they were like, "Oh, you don't have this, you don't have that." And then I also spoke to a lot of mortgage brokers as well when I first started off, because I was starting off. I was basically buying a house, living in it, and then renting it out, and then jumping into another house. And that's how I kind of grew up. And I believed that there was always money for it. But then it came a time after, I believe it was like maybe the fifth or sixth property, where they're like, "You've got no money. Like you can't afford this place." And it wasn't I couldn't afford it. It was the fact that it had a cracked foundation.
Okay.
And I knew it had a cracked foundation. I knew the guy who was going to fix it. He was going to fix it for $3,000. It was going to be a simple fix, no big deal. But the home inspection was online because it was an estate sale. The listing agent had put it online, and the lender took a look at it and he said they saw a cracked foundation. So they're like, forget it. So 2 weeks prior to closing, I got a call from the mortgage broker at the time. He's like, "It's not going to close." I'm like, "What do you mean it's not going to close?" Like, I was literally hanging off my truck when he told me this. I was like, I had ordered the windows, I had ordered all the contractors in line. I had ordered the kitchen, down payment on the furnace as well. We're changing the furnace. So it turns out that they did not want a cracked foundation, of course. So they introduced me to private money. And since then, using private money has allowed me to acquire basically anything I want, as long as I can add value to the building afterwards. Always, that's the trick. The money's there. So to come back to the story, in the beginning, I was constantly hounding the banks. And now those few individuals, because you don't need that many individuals, Now they're calling me saying, we got some funds coming back. Can you use it? And when I do, they're more than happy to throw in 80% loan to value onto a property that they can glance at. I can tell them about it. Also comes with a relationship, but the money is always there because once again, the money needs value. Without value, money just withers away. So he constantly, my private lender, he's got like 5 to 6 million in the bank as an RSP with his wife. He's like, it's not making any money on me, so I need to lend it out. So he's very, very eager. Sometimes I'll call him. I'll say, I'm just looking at a property here. It's probably a good opportunity. What do you think? Do you have some funds that's available? He goes, yeah. And he's already giving the letter of commitment. He's already ready. I'm like, I call him 2 hours later. I go, nope, didn't get this one, but next one I'll get it. So he's very eager to give it out. So you got to talk to the right people. Talk to the right people. It really comes down to, because if you're talking to people who are working 9 to 5, which is nothing wrong with working 9 to 5, but the general population, middle class, they have a different mindset completely about money. And I think a lot of people, it's a misunderstanding of what it is, and they don't utilize it properly. And it shows because, there's proof that those who do win lots and lots of money eventually lose it all. Like there's like 70 to 8% of those who win huge amounts of lottery, you think they're set for life, and because they don't quite understand the concept of it.
Yeah, I love that. It is like an internal skill set
and belief system. And here's the thing: is that your belief system will be pushed to the limits. And I remember I was telling my wife at the time, like, no, I can buy this property. And when it didn't work out, and it was stressful, she was like, look, you see, I told you couldn't buy the property. We eventually bought the property, but it was very stressful, and it opened the opportunity to private money. But without that pushing the boundaries, it would have no private money would have came up to me and said, here it is. So you need to push those boundaries.
I tell people often, whenever you are in your process of changing a belief system, you will be tested.
Yes.
Over and over again.
Yes.
And then, because how else do you practice in your belief system? And
doubt is the killer of dreams. Yeah. So when you start doubting yourself, yes, those dreams will die easily, very easily.
And there's and you talked about this earlier. There's really a caveat here. You change your belief system, you're going to be tested, you're going to face situations like you did that brought all the stress. And really your role is not to go into this negative spin in your head, and then bring on the doubt. And now you're like this negative narrative that's going to keep you stuck down there longer. In fact, the kinder you can be to yourself, the more generous you can be with yourself, the more grace you can give yourself to say, whew, I'm observing. I use this word a lot. I'm observing that all these emotions are coming up for me, that are emotions I'm familiar with. This is how I would have felt and reacted in the past. I'm observing all of this. I'm not going to judge it. I'm going to remain neutral about these emotions. And I'm going to give myself the best foot forward to feel different emotions and to take different actions.
So well put. Because once you observe, then you can distinguish between reacting and responding. And once you respond, you're often responding with a more logical sense of things, with some support from others if needed. Rather than reacting, it's more on an emotional level. And it can be, as you mentioned, you can easily resort to complaining and negativity. That's the easiest resort to do, is complain and say, oh, it's not going to happen. And I hear it all the time. That's not going to happen. It's not going to work. The race hasn't even begun when they started that. They've already lost the game.
I love that. I love approaching a situation like that with a lot of curiosity. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So one thing that also helped, the support. I find support is very important. So recently I told myself, like it says, Think and Grow Rich, just to have a mastermind group. And I couldn't find a mastermind group that I could associate with, that I could identify with, that people were at a similar level than I was, and I can learn from each other. So I created my own mastermind group with a few people from obviously Toronto. There's a lot more of people like myself in Toronto. And it's been very, very good. So next year, I'll be doing more mastermind groups with those who want to start something big and make a big action.
I love that. How does the mastermind work?
How does it work? So we meet once a month and we talk about our successes, our challenges, and what we're looking to achieve. And we have about an hour. Every person has an hour to explain what they've done. And it's always good to start off with your success because it brings people up and it's like, I've achieved this is great. And then you talk about the challenges and sometimes looking for just ideas from the group as well. But also we put you in the hot seat. In the hot seat, we challenge some of the beliefs you may have or some of the habits that you're doing in order to achieve your goals. And then we reevaluate those goals. It's like, is this really what you want? Well, if this is what you want, you're not necessarily showing it from your habits you're trying to do on a regular basis. So we question people, we try to challenge them and bring them up. And most importantly, accountability. We keep people accountable so that every week we know what people are doing, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, and we meet up again every once a month. It has to be face-to-face. I mean, Zoom is great, but there's limitations. With mastermind groups, you need to connect, you need to bond, and there is an aspect of being vulnerable. You need to put yourself out there to go, this is what I really want and desire. This is my dream, and few people talk that way. Most people talk about their opinions, or they talk about facts, they talk about sports, going on in the news. But once you talk about someone's dreams and what they want out of life, there's a vulnerability. You got to be acceptable of that person's desires. And if we work together as a group and encourage ourselves and support each other, there's a higher probability of success.
How do you hold each other accountable weekly?
Emails.
Okay.
We basically send an email saying, this is what I'm going to be doing. And there's like a bit of a chart on what we're doing. It's not like a checklist, but it's something like there's quarterly goals, long-term goals, and what I need to achieve, what I'm doing this week to achieve those goals. And it's just simply an email. It's not like we're going to be calling people up and going, Bill, you didn't follow that one. It's just as you become accountable to somebody else, there's a higher probability that you're going to achieve that. If you respect the other person, you say, we're friends, I'm going to do this. Well, there's a higher probability you're going to follow up with it. If you just simply say it to somebody else you don't know, it's just a question of success, is a question of probability.
Yeah, I love that. And then how long do you go for?
We go for 6 months. Take a break in the summer months. We reconnect in the summer months, maybe play golf or whatever. We go for lunch or something. We do something that as a group that we're going to enjoy, that we're going to bond each other. And then we still chat. And then we go back to it after September for 4 months.
And how many people are in the mastermind?
A mastermind group should no more be than 10 people. After 10, it's too much. 4 to 6 is a good group, but 6 to 10, that's the golden area. 6 to 10 is good because that way there's a wide range of people. They have different backgrounds and they can learn from each other. And ideally, similar age makes a big difference as well. You've got to be able to relate to the person. If one is trying to grow their portfolio, well, you don't want to be talking to someone who wants to retire the next couple of years. It's going to be a bit different,
Yes, I love that. And that just brings like similar people together to encourage support. It's so important. Like I remember joining, it was a free mastermind. Somebody just started, it was more of an accountability group. They just put it out there and said, if you want to meet once a week, we're just gonna, and a few of us joined, ended up at the end of the day being just 3 of us. And we met for months on a weekly basis and was just kind of holding each other accountable. And then it's been so fun. One of the guys that I attended that group with just reached out to me this past week and he's like, I want to take you out to dinner. Let's catch up. And it just forms these like lifelong bonds and friendships as well, which is beautiful.
It does. Yes. And support is so important. Anything I've done without support, I wouldn't be able to do. And sometimes family may not be there. They may think differently. they're loving, but they don't want the same things you want to do, and you're meeting other people who are doing the other things. So it's nice to create a support group that will help you reach your goals.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily the same journey as you are, and walking a similar path. So very beautiful. How can people find you, reach out to you, know more about your next mastermind?
Rene Masse. Just type Google Rene Masse Kingston and I'll show up. Simple as that. My website is renemasse.com, but I also have buyinkingston as well.com, which is for as a realtor and as a coach.
Lovely. Thank you, Rene. It was such a pleasure talking to you. I feel like we can talk for hours and hours at any time. So I'd love to have you back sometime. We can continue to explore and add value to the community on some of
we can
these
talk about
items.
student rentals in Kingston. Student rentals are nuts in Kingston. It's cash flowing again, which is quite surprising.
Wow. And it's such a strong strategy on the cash flow side, for student rentals.
Let me just end with this. I started off with student rentals because it provided a lot of cash flow in the beginning. And then I wandered off to duplex and multiplex further out. And I'm realizing that student rentals was the way to go. Because out of the 25 years I've been dealing with students, not once have I gone to landlord tenant board. But non-students, it seems like it happens once or twice a year. Their students pay, and they pay high, and there's a different lifestyle out of it, but they also leave after 3 years.
That's right.
So it solves the problem that we have in Ontario of the landlord tenant board and people not leaving or rent control.
100%. That's a really good insight. It's so hard to find strategies that work in Ontario because of the LTV and how it's structured. I don't own any student rentals, but that's a really good insight.
Just putting it out there.
Yeah, I love it. So reach out to Rene. We should have definitely dive into some more real estate things. I think we said the same thing on your podcast. Reach out to Rene, find out more about student rentals, how to get started investing in Kingston, the opportunities that are available in the market, and perhaps get some coaching with him as well on how to get it started. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited to hear more as well. And I'm excited to have you back sometime.
Always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.